Thank you. I'm Schill. I am the associate editor of Pseudopod, so I get a second chance at this. A pro-market short fiction podcast, specifically for horror. We're here with Allan, an awesome writer I had whiskey with last year, and Neil, an awesome writer of post-apocalyptic zombiedom in New Jersey. So we're going to talk about mostly the dystopian genre and how we're feeling about it. I kind of wanted to open up, like, how are you guys feeling about dystopia fiction in general in this age of Corona?
Dystopia.
Yeah. Age of dystopia.
Well, I have to say, I'm a member of Codex, which is a neo-professional group that has a lot of writing contests, and I usually write near future science fiction. I dabble in alternative history, I dabble in humor. And the last 3 stories, including the one I'm working on right now, I wrote for a contest, which will eventually be revised and sent out to magazines, ended up to be horror stories. One of them I set out to write a cyberpunk story. I got 1 paragraph into it and said, nah, this is a horror story. And this was generally written within the first weeks of going back to my day job as a teacher in the midst of Ron DeSantis's Florida. So I think that's what when I write things, sometimes it's the subconscious taking over, and then I figure out what I wrote about and revise it on the next draft. So I think it says something that I ended up, even when I intended to write a cyberpunk story, I ended up writing a horror story.
I feel that. So, in general, I am not reading dystopia this year. I found that out very quickly, that's not going to happen. I've had Chuck Wendig's Wanderers stuck on my bookshelf all year. Sorry, Chuck, but I'll get to it. But it is a dystopia where there is a virus spreading through and people are on a road trip to get away from it. And I was like, you know what? I'm in a virus and I can't even go on a road trip to get away from it. So not this year. Are you reading anything, Neil?
No, I'm still writing about it though. But for me though, reading, if it doesn't have the 2 great tastes that taste great together, which is zombies and dystopia, I'm probably not reading it. I rarely read outside of my comfort zone, what I enjoy. I was actually just reading a Civil War story that was very zombie-esque, that was towards the end of the war when they were losing. It was the landscape had become very dystopian, and that's, I don't know, I tend to gravitate. I'm definitely not reading anything happy or romantic comedy wise.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, when it's kind of a hard question to answer because I knew I was going to be on this panel. So the last book that I picked up, because I'd never read it, was the classic dystopia, Yevgeny Zamyatin's We, because I'd never read it before. So because I knew I was going to be on this panel. But in general, I read pretty broadly. I read a lot of different things. So I'm not specifically avoiding dystopia.
I'm avoiding it. I'd say that I'm reading a lot of horror, which I don't know if that's any better, you know? But it's not it's like small problems horror. Like I'm reading Sherry Priest's The Toll, which is like a southern gothic horror, which is very easy. Small town, people disappear. That somehow is better for the brain for me right now than the global, like, World War Z type dystopian thing happening.
I just posted an article on Medium all about how people who do follow, at least in the past, dystopia, apocalyptic, zombie, horror, those people who had more morbid tastes in their fandom have been more resilient in the current climate. And it was based on on a research study that said that those people kind of inoculated themselves, because people who have had a steady, continuing diet of dystopia and actually enjoy it are taking the current events in stride, because they've they've already had mental pre-runs through it. So it may be, if this is going to be the future, if the future is going to be one dystopian situation after another, the remedy may be a generous dose of dystopian and horror literature.
Yeah, I heard that similarly when people are real fans of Shakespeare, they tend to be less distraught when their mother kills their father.
Yeah. The ghost of their father comes back.
Yes. And when they're cleaning out, damn Spot. Yeah, you know, tales told by a fool. Full of
I don't want to hear about fans of Equus then.
Yeah. Oh. But you got I've been shifting my writing. I work for a horror market, so I write a lot of horror, but I've been shifting it toward kind of epic fantasy. Because I was like, you know, I want like the escape during the pandemic or whatnot. And I found myself, my epic fantasy accidentally had a horror setup and a horror mystery at the central plot. Like, I can't avoid making things that way. How has your guys' writing changed, if at all, or have you discovered that it accidentally didn't change at all?
Well, I think there are, I mean, I had written, I actually had to delete an entire paragraph from one of the stories that was still in progress that I had left for about a year because I got busy with other stuff, which talked about a viral pandemic that was made worse by a president that mismanaged it. And that just seemed too on the nose and real at this point, even though I've written it before it happened. That being said, one of the other stories I'm finishing up, I let sit for quite a while because my online critique group had convinced me there's no editor that would ever look at it because it's unrealistic. Who would ever believe that racism isn't gone and that the police could actually brutalize protesters? I don't think I'm going to have a problem with editors believing that anymore, so I'm finishing the story.
Well, it gets annoying when reality...
I'm already in that mindset.
Reality like mimics. Like, I had this cool idea. It was like I think like there was a Jesse the Kid movie, and they're like, they had him do what he actually did in real life, and they're like, no one would actually do that, and they had to downplay it. Sometimes it feels like that, especially in this era where you have to downplay because there's no way that would actually happen.
Yeah, they're leaders like Bolsonaro and Trump that have really made dystopian fiction up their game. I mean, if you really want to be looked at as futuristic, rather than just reporting the news, you got to go somewhere creative now. I think we have to have them and perhaps Putin to thank for these things.
That's why I kind of went to like epic fantasy and then found I couldn't escape to current events anyways. Like, ugh. But yeah. In general, do you guys think that there's a lot of things to be all dystopian about, but in general, I guess just a general check-in, how are y'all doing with the pandemic?
Rolling with it. Basically, I think since I have a background in the sciences, I'm a PhD biochemist, and I even worked on viruses for a little while, I can read the original literature, I can know what's going on, and act accordingly. So I think the uncertainty is the biggest part of fear for many people. And I think that's also true in a lot of horror, is the uncertainty, what's going to come next. So I think most people have been living a dystopian horror story because of that level of uncertainty. I think I have a better handle on prediction just because of my science background. So the uncertainty is probably less than with some people, but yeah, well, that makes me more likely to act on certain things because of the certainty. Mm. If I'm going to see somebody who's not wearing a mask in Lowe's, I'm going to make them wear a mask. And other people might just let it go.
Yeah, I'm coming from the opposite direction. I've never been happier. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. First of all, I always say I predicted it. So no one can say this was unforeseeable. I have been in the ChemBio Red Nuke, so Alan, we definitely got to get together for a panel session on this topic because I've been in the CBRNE community for 20 years. My real job is a defense firm. I work for a defense firm, and our focus is chemical, biological, radiological. So I've spoken at several biosecurity conferences that have talked about this coming. I attended a conference in December where it was briefed. It was called WMD in the next age, and we were briefed on it. And then in February, I attended another DoD conference where we were briefed on it. So I always say, look, in 2016, my book Exit Zero came out, 17, Nuke Jersey, and 18, Zombie Democracy. And my whole cusp of the story that I wrote about was a pandemic coming out during a presidential election year. I had in there the convalescent plasma and what happens. I had in there exactly how the police would react. I had in there the coming together of two protest groups. In mine, it was called Green Rights Action and a neo-Nazi group to form GRASS. And they start, and they start civil disturbance.
Green and ass are the two things that came together, with the Nazis being the ass.
Yeah, well, they were the SS. Green Rights Action and SS formed.
Probably
GRASS.
Also asses.
Yeah, and so I had in there the autonomous zones. I had multiple, in my book though, I had multiple autonomous zones set up where there's, the anarchists have their autonomous zone, the preppers have their autonomous zone, and the mafia take over Atlantic City, New Jersey for their autonomous zone. And so I tell people, look, I didn't pull this out of my mind. Everybody, when this started happening, everybody's like, Neil, how the hell did you think of this? I said, I didn't think of it. I've been talking to the DOD and I've been talking to World Health Organization and HHS for 20 years. And I asked them two things. One, my favorite, give me an example of a real world virus that could be come together naturally or be manufactured that would produce a zombie-like viral response, that people would be almost zombie-ish. And that's described in the book. And then I said, how would the country handle it? I.e., the military, the police, the civilians. And this all went, and that was, 16 years before I wrote it, of research. And then I put the whole book to, but I wanted to make it funny. So I had also written a book about a bunch of guys growing up in New Jersey. And I said, you know what, that's funny, but it's, who cares? It's a growing up story. Everybody's got their stories. So I took the growing up in New Jersey guys, exaggerated, and put them into the zombie apocalypse. So that made it more interesting. But I'm the one that's like, care less. I feel that this will all be gone by January, and then we'll be on to the next.
I hope so. I like hope. That does bring up a question. Is there hope in dystopia? And what role does hope play?
Well, the novel that I've finished that I would be actively trying to get an agent for had coronavirus not gotten in the way. So I'm actually doing a lot more short fiction writing right now while I casually and leisurely look for an agent, is quite dystopic in that it's a realistic projection of what's going on now. But just about everything I write has hope in it, and there's various ways to do that. One way to do that would be with individual characters' story. I mean, for example, even a romance subplot can exist amidst a dystopia. Another way is to find a potential way out. So if dystopia has a technological underpinning, if you could think of a possible answer, then the beginnings of a move towards that is hope. So I am definitely not a hope punk, solar punk type of person, because I think often that ends up very Pollyannish and regressively ignoring the real problems we have on the way. And I think this pandemics are maybe at best third on the list of existential threats to the humanity, with nuclear war being second and the climate catastrophe being first. And I think there is hope. I think there is ways of going through there. I think there's ways of lasting. I think it's not going to look like hope from certain perspectives. I think there are certain perspectives where it's going to look absolutely hopeless, but it depends on which perspective you're writing from. I have, however, had an editor said, you know what, I think this needs to be a lot darker, and if they're going to buy the story, I'll turn it darker.
Yeah.
It's funny because I've talked to several people about, getting it. How do you get your literature into film pitch, basically, or into film lines? And so some of the topics recently have been, look, they're looking at the current situation, and they're not steering towards the apocalyptic because they're wondering if there's just apocalypse fatigue. Now I was just reading today, George Clooney is coming out with a new dystopian series on Netflix called Midnight Sky, all about like the last couple people left on Earth. But it was filmed obviously before all this hit. So it'll be interesting to see if people consume that media, if people want to see it. Are people looking to escape into say, you know what, there's so much scary stuff in my life. Let me escape into some fantasy scary stuff. So to feel maybe a sense of control, sense of this isn't, I can, I have power over it. Or are they going to say, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see it.
I think there's a argument to be made that John Darnell of the Mountain Goats, who's also done a few fantasy novels, he has argued pretty convincingly that people suffering from various forms of mental illness, people who are rather disturbed, the escapism is really helpful in working through that. And I actually buy into his arguments. I think he's right on that. So I think it depends on where you are mentally. So it's going to be an individual's issue. And since you're talking about an entire population, I think there will be audience for dystopia. I think there will be audiences for utopia and everything in between, and people who just won't like comedy. I don't think it's going to be a monolith.
It's funny, you brought up something before, and I'd heard it. I was speaking at a panel down, it was a book panel. God, it was all this, it's become a blur but it was right before all this happened down in Newport News. And was it called Hope Punk? They were talking about this new hopeful version of steampunk that was taken out. Is that what it was called? I forgot the name of it.
Well, solar punk is, it seems like the rules are it's almost back to the 1950s. Technology saves the day. And they're very down on there being anything negative in it. You've got to be able to write about futures where technology bails us out. And you know what? Having worked in biotech, having worked in other things, I can see roles for technology when they're applied appropriately, really helping us through a lot of serious crises, like a vaccine, for example, in this one. But it ends up to be quite Pollyannish. I can't see a rule where you can't be realistic, where if you're projecting into the near future and it's got to be so much better than the current present. I mean, on the climate issue alone, it's going to get much, much, much worse. And the people in less privileged positions are going to see it get even worse before anything ever gets better. And I think that's highly dependent on what sort of politics comes out of this. I kind of like the word that I saw you bandied about quite a bit at FutureCon last weekend, where I was just a lurker, the Capitalocene. The idea that we're in the last death throes of capitalism and something is going to replace it, but it's not clear what yet.
I'm sorry, go on, Nana.
I reject a future, I'm not down on people who are into the tech is the savior. It's just a future where Mark Zuckerberg is the messiah. How can you look at what's happening and then say this is going to be the way out? There's still a certain base of humanity I think we need to get out of this.
Well, what I think it is the younger, when I talk to a lot of younger people, they are finding a different way forward. They are, discovering new ways to go about their business. Growing a business. Traditionally, what did we all do? Got out and hoped to get hired by a firm. I did the same thing, went from one large company, another large company, to a small company, to a large company, and everything, because that was the way you're raised. And I don't think they're going to be looking for that now. I think it started with the gig economy. And then now people are just saying, well, it's rather than a gig, they're launching businesses at 17, 18 years old, more in the creative. And these are the people that are more in the creative world. And they're just finding a different way, specifically with the online. Now, for me, if I was young, single, and during this time, I would probably blow my brains out, because holy crap, there's no way I could have stayed home. There's no way I could have survived with an online only persona. I'm someone, I get my energy from other people. I love going to cons. When I was launching, this is my fourth book, I had booked myself at cons every month for 2020. I was going to be traveling around. I love having booths. If I don't have a booth, I walk around and I meet people. I talk to the other vendors. I talk to other cosplayers. I take pictures. I post. I love, I know some people, it's just draining being, a lot of artists are introverts. I'm an absolute extrovert. Love being out there. And this has just been miserable for me. My kids don't mind. And I'm like, hey, do you guys want to get out of the house and go to mall? Just to get the hell out of the house. I gotta be, I'm fine. I'm like, you want to go play dates? You want to go this? No, all our friends are online. We're playing with everybody here. I'm like, holy cow. If you can survive this, that means you can survive anything, man. You guys are well equipped for this type of world.
I'm well introverted, but I'm like, I hate being at home all day. I'm someone when they get up, they have to go do things. To where I find I'm micromanaging a schedule, knowing that I have to be more. I can't just go out about and do errands or see people or anything. I have to, so I'm like micromanaging home errands. And there's like a madness in that.
Now when you go out, it used to be, okay, I got to remember my keys and my wallet. Now it's my keys, my wallet, my mask, my hand sanitizer, some disinfectant wipes, my hazmat suit, bleach to boil myself,
It's all the perks.
You can't just
I'm kind of in the middle there
anymore.
I'm kind of in the middle. I'm also very much an extrovert, but I'm finding that the online way of socializing does work. I mean, I enjoyed hanging out in the con suites various points between my panels yesterday and just hanging out with people. And that seemed like it had the feel of a con suite. And this summer, my day job as a teacher. So this summer I was on vacation and I was so glad to get the time to write and like put things through several critique loops and get them to the point where they're ready to submit, because I'm always so backlogged on time for that stuff. So, okay, nobody's bothering me. Nobody needs me to go out and do something that the everyday world expects you to do. No, because we're on a pandemic. So I actually got time to write and to socialize with people in various ways online. So
that leads into my next question. How is your productivity being affected? Because it can go either way. Stress kills creativity. Uncertainty and insecurity has been studied that creatives, there's no such thing as a starving artist, basically. When you're starving and don't have a patron to pay for your way and you have insecurity, artists are more likely to not create. So how has this affected you, if at all?
I'd say it's been more affected by when my day job ramps up and ramps down. It ramped way up during the pandemic because I was up till midnight with Zoom with high school kids. So my productivity was at best neutral, maybe a little low during the first phase of this. Then it went way up during the summer when I didn't really have to go anywhere. And I planned to go to several cons. And I'm looking at things online, but you're not getting on a plane. You're not dealing with the travel issues and stuff like that. And I would say it's about average right now. So I don't think I'm someone who's fairly hard to depress. So I don't think it's the mental state that's the issue. It's the how much else am I slammed with on various other aspects of my life that determine how much writing I can do.
Yeah, and for me, a lot of my day used to be personal interaction, meetings, everything, and that's all gone. Now it's all day, start early morning on the computer, Zoom, Teams, email, and then at the end of the day. So when I used to be able to like to come home and shut everything out and just decompress and be able to write in front of my computer, now I just want to get the hell away from my computer because it consumes me. So it's definitely hurt in the creative process because I got to write on one, and by the end of the day, when the work is done, I'm just like, I don't want to be in front of a screen or a keyboard. I'm done. So that's something I got to work through because it's not going to change. It's going to stay this way.
And you're an extrovert, so you probably get a lot of your energy from interaction, and with lowered interaction, it might just drain you.
It does. I feel like I'm like, how the hell am I so goddamn tired and drained? I haven't left my office. I haven't my ass hasn't left the seat. I've been on doing nothing but calls, and somehow I'm exhausted. And you're like, I guess because, you know, it's inertia. You know, I walk the dog twice a day, so I do have interaction with other dogs. That's about and since I have a tiny little itty bitty dog that walks about 4 blocks and is done, even that doesn't last that long.
See, I get home and I'm just glad to not be in a mask and a shield. So I'm perfectly happy to sit at the computer.
Yeah, and one other thing, I have asthma too. So wearing the mask and like, if I'm gonna be out, even socializing, gotta wear the mask. And it's just like sucking air through a straw. So for me, I'm just ripping that damn thing off, you know, as soon as I can. And I'm like, I don't want to put it back on now. So if I say, hey, let's have a fun night, let's all friends get together and go to a restaurant or something, but everyone's gonna wear a mask, I'm gonna be like, that's gonna be 2 hours of me struggling to breathe. So I'm like, no, let's just skip it, because otherwise, you know, so that's gonna be rough. But we're really off the topic. Now I feel like I'm just whining.
Well, it is kind of related, because this is like your mental state, you know? It's part of the creative process.
Now, let me ask you guys. I had this discussion the other day. I write, like I found, because I specifically want to write dark stuff, when I can write is at night. Like I found my sweet spot, 11 at night to 2 in the morning. That's my sweet spot. That is the time. Maybe it's because everybody's in bed, the emails are not pouring in, you're not being distracted with things that could be interesting on TV or whatever, but mainly it's just people are not bothering you at the time, and then it's dark. And I had read something that the people who write dark things like to do it mentally in that time sphere, because psychologically, or what is it called, subconsciously, you feel you're doing it under the cover of darkness. And even though you're not thinking that way, that's how your brain interprets it. I'm doing something secret, and under the cover of darkness, I'm alone. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. It's silent, and you can really just kind of write. Do you guys do this, or is that just me? Am I just a disturbed individual?
I'm a morning.
I think you're just disturbed.
No, it's not disturbed, because I used to do that, and then I got married, and then I'm stuck in the schedule of someone else, and whether or not I'm disturbing them by pacing up and down the halls like a ghost that night. But then I discovered morning. It's this. I think it might be the same thing. It's before everything can get to you. That's what it feels like. Here's my little time when like everything's quiet, and before anyone else, the news, before the emails, before the text messages, before anything in the world can get to me, I have this little cornered off place. And then, you know, it hits noon, and, you know, I got like, I don't know, I got to read something for Pseudopod or something, answer emails, like,
Alan, what do you write?
I adjust. I basically can, it's a lot easier now that I more or less have an empty nest, although I'm having a son who's a senior in college. He's coming back in November, because that's how the colleges in New York are working. So he'll be with me from November to January. But my wife and I just converted kids' bedrooms into separate offices. So when I get time, if I'm up here, I'm writing or I'm doing something like that, and if I want to talk to her, it's downstairs in the kitchen or wherever, not up here.
yeah. Let own personal space. I think specifically when we're in the working at home. If any of y'all are stuck working at home still, I know my husband's working at home, but this reclaiming a personal space, because I've always worked at home since since getting out of college. I've been freelancing, the gig economy. So with him working at home, there's this need to carve out a personal space in my house. And I have my little sign on the door. He's not allowed to bust in the door and complain about politics. He tries, but there is a sign now. And hopefully that stops him.
My wife made me up a little sign. You know, The Walking Dead, it says, "Don't open dead inside." That's the famous, iconic first thing he says. My wife wrote, "Don't open work inside." So, and it's a little red sign that's hung on the door. But Mostly at the beginning, my kids just didn't like if they couldn't log into a Zoom class or something, they would come down and knock on the door right while I'm in the meeting. But most of my stuff is BS anyway. I don't care if the kids walk in. But now they're pretty much, because they're dealing with their Zoom classes and Teams calls and everything like that. So they understand that even if you're sitting at home, you're working. You may be physically here, you're mentally not.
Especially
and that's
for
one of the
writers,
toughest things for writers, I think, is that convincing, especially for first-time writers, convincing your family that this is serious, that you are writing, that you're not sitting in the office running away from them, you're not hiding from the family, you're not surfing the web, you're not just avoiding chores, that you're writing, that is a job. And if they haven't bought into that, that's going to be very difficult, because and you have to foster that too, because if they walk in and they see you're just surfing the web and you're not writing, then they're just going to say every time you're in there with the door closed, you're just surfing the web and hiding from them. But when you're writing, they have to understand that physically you're there, don't bother, that is your writing time, that you are doing something serious, that you are serious about this, and that it does take concentration, and that when you want to come out and interact and perhaps bounce some ideas, but then when you go back, you're working. And it's not just like, if your spouse walks out the door and you're staying home writing that day, and the spouse says, oh, since you're going to be home today, could you take a look at this and do that, and could you run to the store and pick up a couple things, and also I need you to do this and get on. No, I can't do any of that, because I'm writing.
Even thinking about doing that.
Yeah, and I'm not even going to consider it. And so if that's going to create friction, that is not conducive to good writing. It's not conducive to a good marriage, and it's not conducive to good writing. So you definitely have to have the spouse buy in if you're going to write, and especially if you're writing at night, like I do. It's like, my wife knows that, like, okay, if it's 11 at night or 2 in the morning and I'm not there in bed, I'm not running around doing something nefarious. I'm down in the office writing, because it's quiet and I can be alone. And don't come down and ask me if I'm all right. Don't ask me what's up. I'm writing. I'm not there because there's some problem next to you. I'm writing. And if other people do it during the day, that's the same thing. But if someone's going to say to you, oh, you're home all day, great, you can do X.
Vacuum the hallway or something. No. Well, I do vacuum the hallway, but that's another story of contention. But there was a study I read on deep work, the concept of what deep work and what part of your brain is played into it. And it took
could you define what is that deep work?
Deep work is a type of work and problem solve process that happens in like the certain part of your brain that controls problem solving. Deep work is when you have an interconnection between memory, senses, and problem solving, like they all just string together, and you get into that what is called flow state. You ever had that experience where you get tunnel vision and you're just working on the creative product and everything disappears? It's about getting into flow state so you can do what is called the deep work, where all the parts of your brain start lining up between memory, senses, and then problem solving. Usually we're just operating on problem solving, which is very light work. Like, I have a problem, I got to deal with it, I fix it. When you get into deep work, you get this wiring to where your past experiences, and some people call it almost intuitive, because your senses become heightened. And some people have this theory that it had to do with like hunting, with like back in the primordial soup or whatnot, where you're zoomed in on like the prey, and you get that tunnel vision. Well, that's all you care about, and you can manufacture that with creative work in the deep state.
No, I wrote that deep work, right?
I think back in my scientist days, I had about a 19-year scientist career before I switched careers. The part of that where that really resonates is when I was doing mathematical modeling, because this was when computers were not quite advanced to the point where we could be keeping track of assumptions. So you had to be able to keep an entire field in your head, and then also be able to compare disparate data. So what actually got me into writing science fiction was because it was reviewed in the New York Times and I was going to be going on a vacation and I needed to pick up something to read. I heard in the early O's, they did an article on William Gibson. Well, the first book that I picked up was not Neuromancer. It was All Tomorrow's Parties, which is exactly that, plus a drug that allows you to make connections a little easier. So I was just stunned that he had basically described my job. And when I'm writing, I think it's most like that when I'm solving story problems, and it's least like that when I am editing after the first draft is done. So I'm
that's
very
secret parts of the brain, pretty much.
Yes, very analytical, very focused. I've got a checklist of every pass that I go through every time that I'm self-editing a story, and then I can be interrupted. I mean, basically, if you interrupt me 10 minutes later, I'm okay if I'm on that phase. You basically destroyed everything that was in my head if I was on the problem-solving stage.
That's what part of what I read about was that if someone comes and interrupts your flow state, it can take you hours to get back in it. Like there's tricks about how to get into it and everything, but it literally having it interrupted, it takes twice as long to get back in it than it did for you to achieve the first time. And that's where I had to find a balance with people in our lives as writers and creatives, is basically that if you see me laying on the bed staring up, I'm not necessarily not working. It means I might have hit something and I got a problem and I went to a nice dark room to think about it for a second, or I went pacing in the backyard or walk around the neighborhood to think about it. I'm not free. I'm actually solving a problem and I'm actually trying to hit flow state where I can solve these problems easier.
For me, I think that comes when you finally have gotten the book together and it's pretty much done. And now it's like, I need to sit down and organize this, because ultimately when I read it from beginning to end, I'm going to move some chapters around, I'm going to move some of this around, I'm going to change some of this, but now it's assembling it for the final product that is going to the publisher. And that I find is even more difficult writing, because it's not creative. It's exactly as you were saying. The creative has to do, but then it comes into the organizational, the flow. You have to be looking at it from all these different things, and it is putting it all together in the final product. And holy cow, that, could be 48 hours. And I'll do sometimes where I won't sleep. And when you start getting in that, it's just 8 hours will go by and you won't even notice that time is gone because you are just so focused on it.
It's better than Adderall. It's like,
yeah. I wish I could generate it like artificially. What was that drug, the Limitless pill?
Because there are tricks about triggering it, but I mean, it's totally off topic. But this could be quite dystopian if we had a dystopian fiction about.
Yeah, I was wondering if you had a list of questions that you're still trying to get to there, Maggie.
I have ADHD, so.
So we're not helping.
No, like I will go off on a tangent if allowed. But like attached to this, I'm thinking about productivity and flow and deliveries to publisher. How secure have you felt this year? Publishing is kind of not had a great year. A lot of markets have closed. I am very fortunate that for some reason the market I work for is doing great. I think it's because it's an audio format and people want to sit and listen to it. It's an escape. It's horror. Like old
yeah, and you were mentioning what you were doing. I didn't quite understand that. You said what you focus on there. When you said the first two things that you do that you've been focused on. You're an author, but then you said you focus on something else.
I'm an associate editor for Pseudopod. It's a pro market podcast.
Yeah, I don't even know what that. You'll have to explain that term out. Pro market. I know what podcast is.
Pro market.
I'm old. I don't know you young kids with your lingo. I kept forgetting to ask you. I was like, what is she talking about? Pro market.
Pro market. We pay SIFWA minimum. the minimum according to what SIFWA says, the Writers Union, Science Fiction and Fantasies Authors of America. We pay the minimum, sometimes over the minimum of what is required. It basically means we pay 8 cents per word. We say pro market, it means you pay pro rate.
Oh, see, learned something new here.
Yes.
Didn't even know anything about that existing.
You can't call yourself pro market unless you pay the SIFWA minimum.
I tend to listen to it when I'm in the car commuting somewhere, like commuting to work, although used to be I drove around all over South Florida for various writer things, and I'd catch several episodes of Pseudopod in the car when I was commuting. So if you just ask your car to play Google Podcasts latest episode of Pseudopod, you'll catch it, Neil.
Yes.
Yeah, but see, ask my car. You know, if you remember, there was a very old Star Trek. It was the one where they went back in time to save the whales. And at one point, Scotty picks up the mouse and goes, "Computer, computer," and everybody's looking at him like that. And he's trying to instruct the computer. That's me. My car, I could talk to my car all day. I don't think it's going to answer or understand. That's how technically insolvent I am. So I'll what would be great is if and then I want to get back to your topic, because I interrupted you before Alan answered about how we're dealing with. But if you could post it into the group chat, the Pseudopod, in case there's anyone else that is not, like myself, has not heard of that. Would love to know links, and I definitely want to research more. Like, I even wrote a note to myself, I got to look up this deep work. That sounded interesting too. But anyway, sorry. So back to your question, also ADHD here.
Yeah.
What was the question?
Oh, it was, how are you feeling with insecurity? Publishing is not doing great. Markets are closing. Editors are getting fired everywhere.
I started writing pretty late in life, and I already had a family and already had a mortgage and stuff like that. So it has never been my prime support, or even close. Who knows in the future if I can get the first book sold? Maybe I'll get a second book sold. I don't know. But it has not affected me in any great way, because I'm not dependent on it.
For me, it kind of, well, financially also, I'm like Alan. You know, it's not my financial means, but for the book wise, it was devastating. The last book, Business is Dead, came out at the very end of 2019, and the plan was promote it all through 2020. And you know, I found for the past 5 years I've been doing cons that my book sales are like, when I'm about to appear at a con, I promote. Hey, I'm here. And I get some sale. I get sales online. And then I go to the con, and it's just fantastic. You know, I set up the booth. I have boxes of books. I sell. It's just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Afterwards, you get some residual glow of online sales, and then it goes down. And no matter how much I've tried web marketing, it just hasn't resulted in what the sales you can make at a con. So then the next con comes, and it's the same thing. And it's a peak valley. So I anticipated, I did it for the first 3 books. So the 4th book, same scenario, hit all the cons, everything canceled. Bam, wiped out. Not one single con in 2020. So it's reflected in book sales. You know, I get a little bit online, but it's not what I anticipated. So now I have to wait, and I'm going to hopefully relaunch it when the cons pick up again in the spring. I'm already booked for the spring of 2021 onward, but that's forever away.
They're threatening. I'm booked for cons for spring, and they're threatening that they might be online still.
Oh, forget it.
ICFA just went online. So March, and ICFA's now.
Sorry.
National for Creativity and the Fantastic in Orlando. I was planning to go for the first time last year. They canceled it, and now they just decided they're going to be online.
You guys have 3.5 minutes left in the pen.
Okay. I have to give a quick information, because this is one of the reasons I go to a Necronomicon. Pseudopod's open submissions for short fiction is opening on October 25th. If we have any writers in the room, we have 2. 2 right here. I know for sure. It is, we pay 8 cents per word and nothing more than 6,000 words, and we're only open for 2 weeks this year. Like, we have bought so much, we can only be open for 2 weeks this year.
You just told me I have to get those horror stories that I've started finished by then. You give me a date. Thank you.
Yeah, October 25th, 2 weeks from that date, to put it in our inbox. And maybe we'll pay you.
All right. Well, I guess I'll do my plug too. My original book trilogy, the Exit Zero Zombie trilogy, was the Zombie Apocalypse Begins in New Jersey. And then the fourth book, it was my nonfiction book, Business is Dead, Resurrecting Entrepreneurship, all about people who took their fandom of horror, zombies, and The Walking Dead and launched their very first entrepreneurship, or I call it fantrpreneurship. And both of those book series can be found at businessisdead.com, just businessisdead.com, and you'll find links to all the Amazon pages.
Well, two places to look for me. The place I would generally give people is just my website, allandyenshapiro.com. Just leave the dash out. The homepage there is my blog, where I'll blog on things that I think are of interest to my readers, but there's a Stories I've Sold page, and there's a freebies page. Now, the second place to look for this con is the Discord channel under Authors Alley. I put a few links up there. There is one freebie up there. So I was in Flash Fiction Online back in December. It's my first time making any quote-unquote list. I was on Tangent Online's recommended reading list for 2019 with that one. So that's Flash. So if you've got 10 minutes out of your life and you don't want to spend any money, you can click on that one. But I've also included a bunch of the anthologies I'm in. There was one that I... after the editor bought my story, they needed a lot of help with slush reading and editing, so I'm credited as co-author on an anthology of stories set in the Middle East. And that was absolutely a blast, working with Arab writers, Persian writers, Israeli writers, a few other American writers. We got one of Mike Resnick's last stories in there. So check me out on the Discord channel under Authors Alley.
Sweet. We have 30 seconds left. And I'm going to use it to say, I'm sorry to the person who asked the question. Has anyone read To Like the Lightning by Ada Palmer? I have not read it. And I'll Google it. I'm sorry, I'm just now seeing that question.
Worries, but thank you. This was wonderful, and I'll have to get a tutorial from one of you how to get. I actually tried to get on Discord before this, and I couldn't figure it out.
There's a learning curve.
Yes.
Okay, and
yeah, I was just thinking that if I had said, well, I'm on the Discord channel waiting for the Zoom room to open a year ago, I wouldn't have known what any of that meant.
yeah, well, I understand. I think a year ago, none of us would. We'd be like, what? What is Zoom? We don't know.
Thank you, Terry. We miss you.
I miss everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming and participating in the panel. And since we recorded it, then it'll be up on the Necro server sometime in the next few days.
Neat. Thank
Cool.
you, guys. I'll find y'all on Twitter.
All right.
If you're on Twitter.
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Exit Zero Zombie.
I will find you.
Cool.
Okay, I'm on Twitter and Facebook, which you know already because you're on Twitter and Facebook with
yeah.
me. But,
Do I have you on Twitter? Do I have
I'm Allan Author SF on Twitter and on Facebook.
I already have you on Facebook.
You've already got me on Facebook.
Yeah. I just don't know if you're on Twitter or not. But I'm sorry, we're eating up time and I have ADHD. Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys.